Good afternoon. Welcome to the podcast. This is Adam Winters and Joe Gould. We're talking about the Godzilla movie, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack from 2001.
I've often seen it referred to affectionately by its acronym abbreviation, GMK, which doesn't seem to really fully capture all those words in there. But if you read it in Japanese, Giant Monster All-Out Attack, I think is only 5 katakanga, or I probably butchered that. Only 5 letters the way they did it in Japanese. Maybe 6.
Very interesting, Adam.
Mm.
So, Adam, before we get into it, though, did you see the Super Bowl last night?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I had on my TV the CBS broadcast, and on my iPad, I streamed the Nickelodeon broadcast, and I decided I was going to let SpongeBob and Patrick's commentary dominate over Tony Romo's. Because people said it was not the best game Tony Romo ever called, but he's never had his best games in the playoffs. So, there you go.
I would imagine that their commentary style might be pretty similar also.
Quite impressive when you think about the voice actors for SpongeBob and Patrick, Tom Kenny, and the guy who played Baragon Coach. They went full out in character for over 3 hours. They had to do the whole overtime period. And those guys are not as young as they used to be, but they kept it going.
Well, Adam, how long have you been a Lions fan?
Oh, I think I was born into it, although I don't really recall the first game I ever watched. It seems like I was aware of the fact that in the 1992 postseason, they won a game, and I just thought, oh, great, they'll probably win a lot more in my lifetime, even though I wasn't really young enough to care about it in 1992. They did not win a lot more in my lifetime.
So how does it feel to know that the Taylor Swift fans had to wait a whole 3 months to win a championship, and you've been waiting, 38 years or so?
Well, Taylor Swift fans, they're used to getting stuff now. They're used to never being denied, not having to wait for anything. But I guess I'll keep holding out hope that at least every once in a while on a Thanksgiving Day, the Lions could perform admirably, which they did not this year, ironically. I'm afraid the rise of Jordan Love will put the Packers right back to the top of that division, and the Lions will fall into the role of the inevitable also-ran, but who knows? Who knows? I like to think that Dan Campbell sets an example for all of us, that life is more full of failure than success, but sometimes you just don't have to apologize for being confident in your guys, for being confident in yourself and your mission. Just going for it. Come what may. Consequences be darned. Sometimes when you are so used to failure, it's nice to dream. But maybe just once, you can pull out something special and surprise everybody.
Back to the movie. So, this is, I guess you say the title, I think we probably agree on this. This title exists because the previous 2 films bombed.
Seems likely.
And so who was the director, Adam? I don't have it in front of me.
Shusuke Kaneko. That's my best attempt at that.
Yes. And originally, he wanted to make a very different movie.
Oh.
With 3 different monsters. Or 2 different monsters. And he wanted to make it Godzilla versus, I'm not sure I pronounce this one because I just can't recall. Varan?
Yeah.
Baron,
yeah.
Baragon, and Anguirus. Giant Monsters All-Out Attack.
That would have been in it. Would Godzilla have been in it? Sorry.
Yes, it was Godzilla versus the 3.
Yeah.
So this draft featured Anguirus and Varan as 2 of the Guardian monsters along with Baragon. And then when he gave the script to Toho, they asked him to work the monsters Mothra and King Ghidorah into the film for marquee value.
Toho probably made the right decision there, but I really would have liked to have seen the B team or I might even call it the C-Team of monsters. The title that they settled on, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, there is another monster involved in this film who did not get a
Yes.
title billing.
Not marquee enough.
Man, that's a shame.
Well, I don't think it's. I mean, honestly, they called him Godzilla in the film.
That's true. The Red Godzilla, as
Yes.
Baragon is referred to. And I guess if Toho wants marketability, why make the title even longer with a monster who probably isn't going to move the pop culture needle? Well, there you go. But really,
Yeah.
Baragon. I understand the Japanese fans love Baragon, and I can't say I do. Baragon has a fascinating history that really isn't all that fascinating with Godzilla. I believe it debuted as an adversary of Frankenstein, right? In 1964, 65, something like that. Frankenstein conquers the world. Baragon was the opponent. And then when Toho got all the band together to do Destroy All Monsters, Baragon was featured in the movie a little bit, but was misidentified in that movie as well. As in, there was a scene where the Gorosaurus, who is far less, probably the least cool monster in Toho's stable, is destroying Paris, and somebody voices over it to say that Baragon is destroying Paris or London or something like that. So even poor Baragon getting disrespected in classic Toho. Me being a fan of the NES Nintendo Entertainment System Godzilla Monster of Monsters, Baragon does feature as one of the bosses that you have to battle to build up your stats through the game. And Baragon is a major pain in that, I gotta say.
So one other thing regarding the movie, which I'd rather talk about now as opposed to while we're talking about the actual movie, it does involve the plot. So Adam, what if you had to summarize who Godzilla is in this movie? How would you put it?
It's a little bit unclear, but at least for this movie is concerned, as in when Godzilla makes his debut in this movie, he is a prehistoric creature that has been mutated by atomic energy, that does have a previous history in Japan, dating all the way back to 1954, that was defeated at some point. A little bit they gloss over that, but he is energized and he is brought to life by the many, many souls of those who perished in the Pacific conflicts of World War II, presumably, and the atomic bombs. And it includes both Japanese and Americans, according to the dubbing that I watched. And they've all banded together to now energize Godzilla and take out vengeance upon what has become Japan. Not entirely clear why, but perhaps because they have forgotten past sins or something like that. Best I can explain it.
Yeah, that's what I'd written down. Just basically, he's possessed by the thousands of souls that perished, and the reason he came back is because Japan is trying to forget the pain that they inflicted on them. And I found that very odd.
Well, yeah.
And I did look it up though, and that's what I wanted to show. So they're actually, and even during the time when they made this film, there was a basically a controversy regarding Japanese history textbooks.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So it involved they have their Ministry of Education. So all of their textbooks, they're not written by the government, but they have to be approved by the government. And the controversies primarily concern nationalist right efforts to whitewash the actions of Japan during World War II.
I thought it was about Toho was trying to say people have forgotten about Godzilla. So we're trying to... I thought that was the point, more of a marketing thing.
Yeah, so no, it was more along the lines of Godzilla's here to remind everyone. Well, the people are possessing him to remind everyone of the monstrosities that they did and how they deserved judgment back in the day, and you can't just forget those things. Basically,
Well, there you go. Huh.
now I would say I don't. I probably didn't explain that very well, but I probably didn't explain it any worse than they did in the movie trying to explain it either. Even the characters seem confused. They're like, "What? Like but they were on our side." So
Yeah. Now, do we want to dig into now who the other monsters are? Or we want to
yeah,
wait
I
for
think
that?
we could. Well, I think we can just. I think we can kind of jump to the plot at this point. Like you said, it's a continuity reboot. Um, they basically taken the first movie, but as a surprising second film is acknowledged, which was the 1998 American version.
Yes. Yes.
But that's jumping
For the
ahead of
first
us a
time.
little bit. Yeah. So the movie starts with Admiral Taizo Tachibana
That
is
name
speaking
is
to.
very familiar to me.
It was very familiar to me, and I did not. I am confident it is in another Godzilla film, but I could not remember it off the top of my head.
It was the one we just talked about.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go.
Tachibana was the mechanic on Odo Island, the head mechanic.
Okay. All right. Another nod to the film. While we're doing that, because we've made that allusion a couple times now. What's the connection between this movie and Godzilla -1, Adam?
All I know is that the director of -1, Yamazaki, has been on record as saying that he was a big fan of this, more or less, and that he believes it inspired him to make -1, perhaps even subconsciously. But the fact that you have two characters named Tachibana with World War II ties makes me think that was a little bit more intentional.
Yeah. No, I agree. So there's a lot of similarities between these two movies, which I was not aware of before watching this one. So, anyways, he is speaking to a group of soldiers about the greatest threat they've ever faced, Godzilla. He gives them a history lesson about how they defeated him in 1954. And recently, this quote said a monster similar to Godzilla had been seen in New York City, but those outside of America are not quite so sure it is actually Godzilla. So, taking a little to the slam at him.
That's great.
Right after this meeting, they hear word that a American nuclear submarine has disappeared in Guam, and they deploy a research vessel to go look for it. And while they're down there, one of the vessels that they send is destroyed, and the other operator catches a glimpse of a glowing dorsal fin. So not a clear view, but for the audience at home, we recognize it's Godzilla. At the same time, his daughter, Yuri, is filming a fake documentary about a monster that allegedly lives near Mount Myoko. And they get into a little argument with the mayor, their little village, but then an earthquake happens, and they're able to sway the mayor to allow filming because they'll get publicity in the future.
It's very
And
Groundhog
during this
Day.
part, yes, yeah. And then we see this mysterious figure, though, in the woods.
Yes, this is our first appearance. I'll say the name Professor Isayama, but he's not named, right?
Correct.
At this point.
Yeah. I don't think they name him for quite a while, actually. But it's an odd scene, and you kind of wonder if he's real. But it's a little odd. Later, they go to a restaurant with their friends.
So this is Yuri and her camera crew, right? This is who we're at.
Yes.
And then a new character shows up who I don't think was in any of the previous shots, but he's very important to what passes for the rest of the plot in this movie.
Yeah, so Mitsuaki Takeda, that's how I'm pronouncing it, arrives and tells Yuri about a...
Potato patata.
Takeda? Yeah,
Cicada.
We'll go with Takeda then.
Yeah.
And he tells Yuri about a legend involving 3 guardian monsters that defended Japan in ancient times.
He has a book with pictures in it.
Yes, a very nice picture book. One of those like collector's editions of The Lord of the Rings you might buy on Amazon.
Mm.
And then ultimately, she gets drunk. He takes her home to her father. That's where we see that she is the admiral's daughter, and she kind of hands her off to him. So we don't really see who the three monsters are in that scene. But do you want to go ahead and discuss that now?
Well,
Who
I
they are,
think
at
the
least.
very first image they show in the book is what a very primitive rendition of King Ghidorah. And then we get our look at Baragon, and then we get something that I thought was a plant monster, but then I realized, oh, that's Mothra.
Yeah, thought you were gonna get Violante for a minute.
Well, yeah, it looked more like Violante in the drawing.
So after that, they cut to a scene where there's a. I don't think we realized who he. I didn't remember him from the scene, but I should have. It's the mayor. He's in a car with his mistress, which is not very clear. And he's basically talking about the documentary. And then you get this motorcycle gang.
Oh,
They come
yeah.
up and they drive around the car and do some damage, and it came across very circus-like.
Yeah, the reminds me of a scene in Batman Beyond with the Joker gang on the motorcycles, but something very significant they happen to damage and knock over on their motorcycles happens around this time.
And what is it?
It's a little statue or idol or shrine. I guess we'd call it the shrine is the most accurate word for it. And they're not really disturbed by it. They just do some donuts and they go off on the road and they start harassing a poor semi-truck driver, just doing his job as they're about to come up to a big tunnel.
Yes, and then suddenly the tunnel collapses and buries him alive. And we see the next morning the military comes up with these DO3 missiles. I don't know if
Well,
that's.
we do get a shot at the monster though. The truck driver is a witness.
Oh, yes. You're right. So we see Godzilla.
Red Godzilla.
I'm sorry. Yes, Red Godzilla. Yes. Even I got confused as to who he was.
You thought it was a bad dub.
And anyways, they have these missiles which are similar to the ones we saw in Mega Guires, where they kind of latch on. Only those weren't missiles; those were something else, but it's similar technique. Like they saved the prop or something. And then we see another instance going on at Lake Akita, or Akita, whatever you say. And you have
some
a group
more
of teenagers
up to no good.
Yeah, causing trouble, robbing a convenience store. They even try to drown a dog.
That is unforgivable.
I mean,
right there.
Absolutely. You want to get heat on your characters. That is one way to do it. And they also they also destroy another shrine.
Oh.
So what happens to these yahoos, Adam?
Well, they go out in the boat, and for some reason, one of these guys is so upset with the little guard dog who's on a leash for barking at him, knocking over the convenience stores. They say, I'm going to put this doggy in a crate, and we're going to go out in our little rowboat. I'm going to dump the dog in the crate, and they also take the shrine, and they stuff it in there with the doggy. And they're going to do the deed, and then all of a sudden, out from the water comes... I've never figured out the best word for Mothra in the larval state, but there you go. Whatever that is. And it looks horrendous when it comes out of the water at night.
Yeah, and it takes them out, basically.
And then we're not sure exactly what happens to them. There are people who are on the beach, and we're not sure what Mothra really does. It just looks like she's scooching her way up the beach out of the water. But then we cut back to the Tachibana household now that the next morning Yuri has sobered up and her dad's making her breakfast and catching up with her. And they see the news report about all this. And did you notice that they made sure to make it clear the dog was rescued in the news report?
Absolutely.
And they report that 11 teenagers were killed. And it's very odd, at least what I saw, the way they said they were killed. As in, they weren't just drowned in the water, they were found in cocoons. Did you get that in your viewing?
Yes. So I'm assuming, it's not made clear, that Baragon and Mothra are attacking them due to their damaging the shrines. But it's not overly clear. But
Yeah.
it does. They don't really make the connection between the shrines and the monsters at this point. We're just left to figure that out on our own. But also, this is where I'd like to point out, like, this movie is, like, tonally is just entirely different than almost any other Godzilla movie up to this point. Taking out Shin and -1, but up to this point, up to 2000, like, I feel like they present this movie as more of like a true horror film. There's a very serious tone. The scenes are very horror movie esque. You have dark backgrounds. You have a shaky camera, quick camera cuts when things happen, so that they can allude to death without actually having to have practical effects budget for it.
Mm.
And we'll see throughout, like, not necessarily in this particular scene, but they go out of their way to show the monsters killing innocent people and non-innocent people,
Okay. Mm.
which you don't typically have in these movies. You see the buildings crash, and you may have allusions to mass death, but we'll see later. Like, there's multiple times where, you could have had this scene in any other horror movie from the 80s and replaced Godzilla with Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger, and you would have had a very similar scene play out.
Now, I don't know that I recall any scenes where we'll call them the Guardian monsters, kill what may be innocent people. It's not clear if that's the case. Let's
No,
just talk
I agree
about
with that.
let's talk about one of Godzilla's debut scenes, but not his full body debut. We have a coastal house where I guess some teenagers are playing ping pong, hanging out, whatever. And they're not necessarily up to no good. They're just having a good time.
Oh, they're doing naughty teenager things. You know it.
All right. But they don't break any shrines, and they don't try to drown any dogs, and they don't destroy other people's property. So yeah, if it was an '80s horror movie, they'd definitely be getting the axe. But in this case, everything starts shaking, and the house is shaking, and everything is falling off. And then there's a poor guy in the bathroom in the uncut version that I watched, and he realizes something is a lot worse, because I guess he can somehow look out the window and see what's coming to him. And then we get a very interesting shot of him in the window that pans out to the whole little house that he's in. And then we get the foot from Godzilla vs. Bambi that comes down on him.
Yeah. No, it was a good scene. It was but again, not the typical scene you would find in a Godzilla movie up to this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. And the defense ministry does not recognize this as a real threat somehow. I guess they're just attributing this to natural disasters that don't have witnesses or enough witnesses. Because Mr. Tachibana says at some point to Yuri and Takeda that his program is about to be shut down. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself on that.
It's around the same time. I think. Yeah, go ahead.
We gotta at some point get back to Professor Isayama when Yuri goes to interview him along with her companions, her photographer, and her mild-mannered, tall friend with glasses, Takeda. And they go to a police station because for some reason Isayama has been arrested for destroying shrines somewhere. I forget where.
Which makes you wonder if there's some other creatures floating around. Yeah, and later on we'll see with the last monster that I'm assuming he was looking for King Ghidorah. Then that's when he explains to them that Godzilla cannot be stopped by normal weapons, but the three guardian monsters, if we can awaken them, then perhaps together they can defeat him. And then he also tells them that's when he mentions that Godzilla is possessed by the thousands of souls. So after that, they go and they visit her father. They tell him about the guardian monsters, show him the book. He dismisses the story, and then we get a background. Well, we get his background story that he was actually present as a small child when Godzilla raided Tokyo in '54. He lost his parents. He's haunted by the memory of it. I don't think I'm going to bring it out now. I don't think they mentioned it quite yet, but basically he also at some point it gets shared that they never actually it wasn't the military that killed Godzilla, but that it was a scientist who came up with a weapon, killed him, and then they took the credit for it in order to make the people at ease, basically, in case he ever came back.
Little
I
government
don't think,
skepticism there on the
yeah,
commentary.
I don't think that's where they shared it, but it fits in nicely in terms of the plot.
Now, the dub subbed I watch, I think they called it a chemical weapon, which I don't know if that counts for the oxygen destroyer. Maybe so.
Yeah, it was definitely an allusion to it, and it makes sense. You know, he's a small kid; he wouldn't know the exact name of the weapon. He wouldn't know the name of the scientist because they covered all that up. So it's actually
Yeah,
probably a good thing that he didn't have that information.
he knew it was covered up, but he couldn't tell you much more than that.
Yeah. So then we have a suicidal man trying to hang himself from a tree with his tie. I didn't catch this initially, but he is standing on a fallen shrine,
He tips it
and then
over
the
and then stands on it.
yeah, I just assumed it was a rock. I didn't catch it was an actual shrine.
And I think it's
But
the
then the
same shrine that Takeda got the piece from, somehow.
yeah, it would need
It's
to be.
unclear.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it would need to be because the ground falls underneath him. So he collapses into a cave, and there he sees this giant three-headed dragon frozen in the ice like Captain America.
Oh, yeah.
This man then apparently does not want to die anymore, and he runs to the police to tell them what he saw. Of course, they don't believe him. But then an earthquake strikes, and the monster surfaces.
Baragon, you mean? Or Red Godzilla?
I'm sorry, yes, Baragon.
Red
Red
Godzilla.
Godzilla surfaces.
See, it's
And this,
interesting. Most of the people in this movie have heard of Godzilla, but they believe it was just a legend, even though it would have been about 50 years prior, more or less, there.
yeah, yeah. So this Baragon, whether he does it on purpose or not, isn't really clear. But later on, it becomes likely the old man in the police station gets out because he destroys the police station, but doesn't injure the man.
That's right.
And then
Baragon rips the wall out and takes a peek at all the prisoners in there, and then just sort of goes on its way.
yeah, Baragon he could be from a SpongeBob cartoon, but so then Baragon wanders through the countryside. Around the same time, Godzilla surfaces, comes ashore, starts wrecking a nearby town, uses his breath to obliterate some civilians. Again, very not typical Godzilla moves for movies up to this point for the most part, in my opinion.
I'm always curious anytime Godzilla decides to use the atomic breath when he doesn't have to. Like when he doesn't seem to perceive a threat, but he just does it. I've never been.
Well,
I know for the movie,
he's an evil SOB in this movie.
The movie just wants to put that out there and get it established that he can do that, and they get the little mushroom cloud shot, the wide angle. Did you notice that one of the survivors from the lake incident is the lady, and she's in the hospital when Godzilla makes landfall? Do you remember that scene?
I did. It was a nice scene. Again, they're really wanting to make sure that you are not cheering for Godzilla. I mean, about the only thing he could have done would have been use his atomic breath on a dog. I mean, that's about the only thing they didn't pull out to make you realize he's a bad guy in this movie.
He looks so grumpy the way he walks. This is a different suit actor than the one we've seen in Megaguirus in 2000. But he does a lot with his arms, like he's huffing around.
Yeah, very more humanoid kind of arms. And he's not very tall, but the suit is definitely more of a classic look. I really do enjoy the suit. And while we're talking about the suit, what's notable about his eyes?
He goes for that comic book style white eyes that you see on a lot of characters. No visible pupils.
Yeah, and that was intentional by the director, or the director who wanted his version to be evil. And he felt that the eye shape really would help with the audience perception of that, which is also this again. The eyes are one of the things, and there's controversy among Godzilla fans in terms of, some people love this movie for being different. Some people do thoroughly dislike the idea that Godzilla is just a pure villain, and it kind of because it loses some of the allegory to the bomb.
Mm. I wouldn't call him a
But
true
yeah,
villain in this movie if the backstory is true about the souls of the deceased are trying to
well,
somehow remind Japan of those things.
that's
I'm just
it. It is complicated, and it's never really clear whether or not the souls are controlling Godzilla. Like you
all right.
almost want to
Yeah,
take it that way,
yeah.
or are they just
Along
sending
for the ride.
this villain, or yeah, are they along for the ride? Are they guiding the ship, or are they just, releasing this evil monster onto the land? It's a little bit different. But I mean, you could definitely say if he's possessed by him, he's not necessarily evil in that case. His eyes, if they didn't glaze over and his pupils came back, you might get a different Godzilla.
Hmm. Now, there's something
No,
about the suit that I
yeah,
don't like in this, and as much as I do like it, the neck at times looks a little too bit like a chicken neck. Just a very long. It leans forward. The head is fine, but I think the way the suit is put together, it makes some of the seams a little bit visible around the head to the neck. Like you could see that was probably where the suit actor needed to remove the head in order for the electronics to be working in there. Doesn't blend together seamlessly.
no. My gut says is the suit probably is cheaper. They basically had the same budget as the last movie, but they had more suits to make, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one reason why you have a lot of these scenes happen. You don't necessarily see the physical movement. You see, like, you have the quick cut where the guy getting smashed in the bathroom. It's a quick cut. You don't see too much, so they can get by cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, he was more mobile in the last movie, but they really just taken the previous suit and modified it. They didn't have to make a whole new suit.
He no longer has the red or pink tinted dorsal fins. They're back to a more traditional color in this one.
The blue, the color they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
All right,
And
back to the movie.
and yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I just saying there's really nothing to remark about on his atomic breaths. They don't I say that in a good way because they don't try to overdo it with the VFX. Just his fins glow and you see it in his mouth and he fires it and it's fine.
Yeah, and he's very quick to be able to use it again. There's no recharge. He's pretty much able
Yeah.
to go as desired.
Got all them souls powering him for this movie.
Yeah. All right, so back to Baragon and Godzilla. They get into a little fight, and
Poor Baragon.
yeah, he gets smashed, and then he gets
It
fried.
ain't even
Then he gets
close
fried
though.
again, and he
It's like Apollo
explodes.
Creed and Ivan Drago, but the first cut of that. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, and I will say this too: they didn't make it real clear that anything special was happening when he died. So you got so it's very odd in the sense like you got if these three monsters go team up, then they might be able to take him down. But
Yeah,
then the first one gets killed like really quickly. So then you're down to two monsters. It's like,
who
how does
haven't
this work?
even emerged yet in their full form.
Yeah,
It's like they
yeah.
got to take turns on going up against Godzilla. I think when Baragon dies, they actually did set the suit on fire, but doesn't Baragon go into little pixie dust when it dies finally?
I think he did, but I didn't. I didn't notice anything special other than like spirit creature died.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't stand out to me. Um.
Yeah.
So then, let's see here. Yuri gets a bicycle, starts following Godzilla, taping him from a distance. The cocoon at the lake splits open, and you get the true form of Mothra emerging as the guardian monster. And then the old man, who was previously in jail and freed by Baragon, goes to the cave and awakens Ghidorah. And
Breaks a lot
then
more statues, does he?
it wakes him up, thaws out the ice. Then we have battleships in Tokyo Bay. They're trying to prepare for Godzilla's arrival.
This
Go ahead.
Ghidorah is not near impressive when he first emerges in this movie.
No, and they mentioned it somewhere, and I can't recall exactly that he was only supposed to come out in like 3,000 years. So he hasn't had
10,000.
time,
Well, that's
or 2,000,
10,000.
or whatever it was. So he's
It's
not.
only been 2,000.
Yeah, so he's like baby form. He's like young adult, basically.
Takeda said he still has a lot more growing to do, then he'd be the strongest. That was the claim, anyway.
So the military's getting ready for Godzilla to arrive. He gets there. He's attacked by Mothra, who has a new weapon. Fires some kind of stinger that explodes into his face.
Yeah, I
wasn't real
know.
impressed with that.
That's Mothra. I've never been impressed with Mothra.
True. So Godzilla fires his breath at it. He gets out of the way. One of his blasts misses and strikes a landmark. It kills a bunch of soldiers inside. So more innocent casualties, so to speak. Then Mothra lands on his head and scratches his face.
Yeah, I didn't know Mothra had that sharp appendages. That I call her she, just because that's the traditional way Mothra has been portrayed. There was a little cameo in this movie of the two twin women that harkens back
I like
to
that.
the. But it had no other bearing other than being a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the audience on this plot.
Nice little Easter egg. Yeah, so that was, and then Ghidorah gets there, gets into the battle, bites on Godzilla.
Mothra's still alive when Ghidorah shows up, right? But Ghidorah has no wings. Is this?
Yes,
is that how I remember?
I think Mothra is still on Godzilla's head. If I'm not mistaken, they kind of do a tag thing, and he bites into Godzilla and kind of does electricity attack. I never really understood the relationship between electricity and Godzilla and whether it helped or hindered him, but in this scene, it's
like
hindering.
When Ghidorah uses it, it usually hurts him. But yeah, it's very unclear.
Yeah. Anyways, Godzilla overpowers both of them, bites down on Ghidorah's neck. So you see blood, not something you frequently would see in a Godzilla movie.
They probably burned a lot of budget to get that bloody neck on Ghidorah there.
Yeah. Then throws him into a building. Then he finally is able to blast Mothra with his breath. He's about to finish off Ghidorah with another atomic breath, but Mothra flies in the way, takes the blast, and she goes flying. He wipes out some military people, preparing to destroy the battleship that Tachibana is on. Mothra attacks him again. This time, Godzilla turns around and completely destroys her.
With the atomic breath, that's what I...
Yes, with the atomic breath. So she goes up in flames.
Did he shoot her twice? Is that... Did he get two shots of atomic breath on her?
Well, he got two total. I can't remember if he did two in the scene. But he definitely got more than one overall.
Yeah.
And then she kind of turned into fairy dust, similar to the Baragon from earlier. And her energy flows into Ghidorah. And if I'm not... Is this where the Baragon dust comes to? They kind of show him?
I think that was closer to the end, but this is the scene when Ghidorah, I think, turns into a VFX shot. He goes all CGI in the sky.
Yeah, and he gets his wings. He grows up, basically. And I think at this point, he would be considered the King Ghidorah.
Okay, yeah.
So, King Ghidorah, he takes flight. He's surrounded by this energy kind of shield thing.
Yeah.
Godzilla fires his breath at it, but it's deflected. And then this big giant ball of energy gets thrown at Godzilla, and he throws him out of the city and into the bay.
Impressive.
Yeah.
And then what's the worst possible thing Ghidorah could do next? Now that he can fly, I think that would be to go underwater and fight Godzilla under the bay. Well, How do I want to tackle that?
Yeah, they go into the bay, and then the admiral and one of his commanders also goes into the bay. At this point, I think I'm trying to remember. At some point, we become aware that Godzilla has a wound on his chest.
Now, there was earlier in the movie, the defense team did get a shot of their D3 drill missile on Godzilla, and it didn't do a whole lot to him, but it may have exposed that wound. I thought Ghidorah also got a shot at some point, but
Yeah, on first watch, I thought Ghidorah did it, but you might like you said, a lot of things weren't real clear in this film, so it may have been from that earlier attack.
So we should comment that since there are human actors in this movie, Yuri and Takeda go up on the bridge to do a video recording from the bridge as Godzilla and Ghidorah are fighting in the water under the bridge, even after Commander Tachibana, who is in one of the two submarines who are circling Godzilla and Ghidorah, tells her to get to safety. I don't recommend getting out on the bridge, but that's what they done.
Yeah, and she gives a very, very dramatic speech on camera about how she's going to film it to the end and follow the news. And then what immediately happens?
I forget who done it, but the bridge gets broken in two. Was that Godzilla atomic breaths from under the water?
Yeah, so Godzilla's breath hits the bridge like immediately after she finishes her rah-rah speech.
And we get a 2002 Spider-Man Mary Jane shot.
Yeah, very unrealistic shot where Takeda is holding Yuri by the arm for a very, very long time so that she does not fall into the water. And he is not a superhero.
He is, too. You can't tell me that he isn't. Takeda.
Well, he's the same size as she is.
There is a whole nother movie that we're not being shown here about what Takeda does when he's not wearing his glasses. I'm just telling you right now. Something's up with that guy.
Not every hero wears capes, man. Anyways, while she's dangling there for an hour, that's where the stone falls out of her pocket eventually.
Oh, Takeda's pocket. It's in Takeda's.
Yes. I mean, yeah. And
it
re-energizes. Yeah, and so King Ghidorah is re-energized again. Not really sure why.
Oh, wait. We skipped a very important scene that is the matter of some confusion based on what version you're watching. And it explains why Ghidorah ends up being down for the count temporarily.
Oh, yes. So we mentioned earlier that your version of the movie subtitles were based off of the English dubbing, and the subtitles I saw were based off the Japanese dubbing. And this is an instance where I think the fact that this broadcast on the Sci-Fi Channel kind of messed things up. So in your version of the movie, they fire one of these D3 missiles at Godzilla, but he moves out of the way.
The weak spot.
Yeah, the weak spot. They lock on because they're using thermal imaging. Yeah. And then, but right before it gets there, Godzilla sees it and moves out of the way, so it strikes King Ghidorah and does some pretty serious damage to him. And in your version, you get a very awkward phrase where the guy who shoots it screams, "Got it!" right as it hits King Ghidorah, as if that was what he intended to do in the first place. So you either were confused by the dub, or you mistakenly thought that he hit Godzilla. Now, in the actual Japanese version, you get the guy saying an F-bomb. So he's recognizing that that didn't go as planned.
Yeah.
So very I'm assuming that I kind of feel like maybe whoever did the dub for the TV series or the TV version didn't recognize that it hit the wrong monster or just wasn't paying attention, because they could have used all kinds of things to throw in there other than "got it."
Completely misunderstood the scene. Didn't get it at all.
Yeah. So, and that takes Ghidorah out. That's when the rock falls into the bay.
Yep.
Gives him a
And
fresh energy. He comes
I was
back
wondering
up.
if it was a power up or if it was just an HP refill when he got the extra shard coming down with the extra souls.
Yeah, I think it's more of just an HP refill.
All right. He doesn't get a lot of
But I don't know.
HP. He gets a little bit.
Yeah. So he flies to the surface. Godzilla comes back up too. Ghidorah starts blasting him with these beams from his mouth. He takes quite a few hits. And then it appears that he absorbs the energy from these beams, adds it to his breath, to his atomic breath, and then just really lets loose on King Ghidorah with his wicked-looking atomic beam.
It's impressive he can do that atomic breath while underwater consistently. You don't see that a whole lot, but unless he's just really near the surface.
It's always a nice visual, too.
I think a lot of these underwater shots work a lot better on film than I think they would. It's weird, especially when you have a winged character fighting underwater, but it seems very well lit the way they do this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd been note that it was they're in the dark the whole movie basically, but you can see most of what's going on. So then you have all the spirits of the three guardian monsters kind of pop up in the sky like Star Wars Jedi's.
Yeah.
And they flow into Godzilla. So this is where I'm a little confused on where Baragon came from. But
yeah,
they all go into him and he sinks. And while he's under that water, what happens to him?
Well, there's the commander Tachibana, Commander Tachibana. He decides he's going to go Shikishama. He's going to take his submarine, since they failed with the external shot on Godzilla. He's going to go all the way in and attack Godzilla from within, which is probably one of the better ideas most people have in these movies when it comes to the need to actually defeat Godzilla. And it
Though
gets
you are
a little
making
bit
an
more
assumption
confusing to watch.
You are making an assumption that you can get from his mouth to his stomach, though.
Yeah, I don't know how he's doing any of that. I guess he has lights on the sub. I guess he figures... I don't know what part of his anatomy he actually gets to. The movie starts to make less and less sense at this point, but his goal is to fire a D3 missile from inside Godzilla and hope that does the trick. And I guess it does, but only because Godzilla starts charging atomic breath again. Right? This is another -1 callback, possibly?
Yeah, so he's inside. At some point, he's knocked unconscious, and he has a vision of his daughter, and then he wakes up.
The daughter has her lungs full of water here, because she fell in, and Takeda's
they're almost having like a shared
her.
vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost as if they're having the same vision. But
Near
then
death.
so she's saved. He wakes up, fires the missile out of the chest, so to speak. He comes back to the surface. He's getting that obviously wakes him up. He starts to getting ready to fire his breath at Yuri and Takeda, but then this I think actually now that the missile drill explodes and he's got this exposed wound on his chest and he's very painful. He tries to fire his breath, but it doesn't make it up to his mouth. It goes out of his chest instead.
Ooh,
which kind of makes sense, but I feel like it has too much focus on the energy. Like it should be more like kind of just oozing out and killing everything around you. But whatever.
Yeah.
So when he falls underwater, he tries to do it again, but it's not working. At some point, either the pressure built up too much and he explodes.
Because when in doubt, this Godzilla will fire atomic breath. He
ain't holding back.
He does, and he won't stop.
Yeah. And he gets pissed off. He's firing the breath. So he explodes, and then we see that actually on his way down in the water, Tachibana
comes off.
is able to say what?
The head comes off, doesn't it? Godzilla?
No, he explodes.
Okay.
Yeah, he explodes. And then, but before he explodes, Tachibana is able to get his ship out of his body. Maybe the head explodes first, but
it's sort of a Return of the Jedi where the Millennium Falcon is flying away from the Death Star.
yeah, and he kind
Looks a lot
of
worse.
gets blown out of it actually. So, anyways, he emerges. He finds his daughter. They embrace, all that good stuff.
No, they don't embrace. Remember that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
He says, "Don't
they're
touch
about
me."
to embrace, but he has an awkward, "Don't touch me, I might be radioactive," which is probably accurate, but makes for a little odd scene.
He says, "I gotta be sure. I gotta get it tested," and they just kind of leave it at that. And they do a salute to each other, and
Well,
then
no, she salutes him.
Oh,
she
yeah.
salutes him, and then he says, "No, don't salute me. We need to salute the 3 guardian monsters," basically.
And then he turns
So
to the water.
Yeah.
And again,
And
like
then,
-1, it sort of ends in a salute. So
yeah. And then one other loose note, which I don't go too far with, and it's interesting, but it makes the movie make even less sense, is we see the company she worked for, they're looking for the old man to interview him.
I say Yama.
But then then they find out that the guy has been dead for almost 50 years, and he is not only not longer around, but he's disappeared from the film they taped earlier.
Well, woo, man.
I feel like that's a very Japanese move. Like, I feel like
Hey.
that's a very Japanese move. I don't think that would have stuck in America.
I
But
don't
it
know.
probably
I
works
think
a lot better over there.
It would have in 1950s American films of this nature.
Yeah, this is 2002.
Yeah.
Or 1, actually, isn't it? Yeah. But
Yeah,
anyways.
3 consecutive Godzilla movies per year. 99, 2000, 2001.
Yeah, I mean, the third one came out 2001, and the first one was called Godzilla 2000. So, yeah. And then the movie ends with a shot of the seafloor, and you have Godzilla's heart begins to beat, and
now,
the theme plays.
We're pretty sure that is his heart. We were not certain on -1 if it was just an organ
this is
or
the
a
heart
piece
beating.
of flesh. Yeah,
very
this
is
clearly.
The heart beating. It was another clear horror movie type move.
Yeah, never truly dead so long as there's some recognizable body part laying around.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's it. This is GMK GMA complete.
Yeah. And it was a good movie. I was prepared to be disappointed and walked away pleased, though recognizing that there were plot holes all over the place, which made a lot more sense after I saw what he originally wanted to do with the movie.
Yeah. Studio involved, what do they call it? Tampering, meddling, studio meddling, but
for the right reasons in this case.
Yeah. All except plot. Now, I guess I should point in here. This would have been the first time we would have seen Ghidorah not only as not a villain, but as an Earth-based monster instead of an extraterrestrial.
Yes, and also the only time he has been smaller than Godzilla, which I'm assuming that's because he was the hero and they needed, you got 3-on-1, you need to have smaller guys.
I was trying to think there was something else. People have the philosophy, I think you've articulated it before, there's 2 ways you can do a Godzilla movie traditionally. You either make him the main, perhaps even the only threat to humanity, who has to figure out a way to take him down as the villain, or you introduce other monsters for Godzilla to fight and you make him the hero. This movie manages to do both of those, but keep Godzilla the villain and make the other monsters the heroes. And the humans are still the one who ultimately defeat him.
Well, Adam, is there anything else about the movie you wanted to discuss?
Oh, there probably is, but I've forgotten some things. The -1 parallels are interesting to consider. Some of the story beats. Just kind of the way Godzilla was beaten. Some of the cinematic effects there. Yeah, he's a good-looking monster. He's all right.
No, it's a well-shot film, that's for sure. They did well with their budget. There's very few of the real cheesy scenes that we saw in the last few. I think they worked around them much better this time. And like I said, I think it has a nice horror, like 80s horror movie vibe going to it.
Yeah.
If you had like a 50s monster film and an 80s horror film kind of mixed together, this is kind of what you get. Almost like the 50s movie Reptilicus. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I've not seen that one. I got to track them down at some point. See all these things.
I think I saw the Mystery Science Theater version of that. Well, I think that's it.
So next time we may tackle the other big bad, the debut of Mechagodzilla in the Millennium series, and see how that goes for old Big G.
Yeah, there's not too many left in the Millennium series, but we're getting there.
I almost think that when we get to Final Wars, we should hold off on that and do a lot more of the Showa stuff, since Final Wars is sort of the destroy all monsters of its era, and they try to work in as many cameos as possible. But yeah, definitely the Mechagodzilla movies. Got to look at those.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll be doing next. Well, it's been a pleasure, Adam.
Always, even with all the Swifties celebrating, at least I've still got Godzilla.
Always. The Lions will let you down every year, but Toho stands before you, waiting to lift you back up.
That heart just keeps on beating, even after the worst meltdowns you can imagine.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.